A whisper travels through time in the quietest corners of an elegant home. A small glass bottle can hold a secret powerful enough to reshape an entire life. Before we drift deeper into the past, if you find a little piece here, please gently leave a like and subscribe to the channel so we can meet again in the next historical dream we share together. It is Boston, it's in Bashu. Outside, the city is still half asleep beneath a thin winter veil. The night has not fully released its grip, and the morning has not yet claimed the streets. A pale, milk blue light lingers between the brick buildings, caught in the bare branches of elms that line the quieter lanes. Somewhere far off, a carriage wheel speaks softly against frozen ruts, and then the sound fades, as if it too remembers that this hour belongs to hush and slow breathing. Inside a brownstone near Beacon Hill, warmth gathers in layers. It clings to heavy curtains, settles into velvet upholstery, and rests in the polished wood of a hallway table where yesterday's letters lie unopened. The air smells faintly of cold smoke from the hearth, of beeswax from a recently rubbed banister, and of lavender sachets tucked into drawers to keep linen sweet. In the second-floor bedchamber, Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell begins to wake. Not suddenly, not with the sharpness of alarm. She returns to the surface the way a leaf rises in still water gently, almost without decision. The faintest creak of the house, the smallest sigh of wind against the window pane, the delicate shift of a bed spring as she turns her shoulder, these are her signals. They are enough. She lies for a moment, letting the weight of her quilt settle. The quilt is stitched in a pattern of small flowers, each petal carefully worked, each thread placed by someone who believed that patience was a virtue a woman could hold in her hands. The fabric is warm, but the air beyond it is cool. The room carries the night's chill in its corners, especially near the window where a thin line of frost has traced the edge of the glass. Eleanor's hair is braided for sleep and pinned loosely at the nape of her neck. She wears a high-collared nightdress. Cotton, softened by many washings. The cuffs frayed in a way only she would notice. Her face is calm in the dim light, composed in the manner expected of her. Even here, even alone, Victorian composure is not only for parlours and guests. It becomes a second skin. She listens. A distant clock ticks in another room, steady and unhurried. Downstairs, the faintest stir suggests the household beginning to shift, perhaps the cook moving a kettle, perhaps a maid stepping quietly across the kitchen floor. The sounds are soft, almost respectful, as if the servants understand the rhythm of the home better than anyone, and they keep their footsteps wrapped in cloth. Eleanor allows herself to sit up. The motion is careful. She does not wish to strain the tightness that has been living behind her ribs for weeks, a sensation she has learned to describe with polite words. She might call it nervousness. She might call it fatigue. She might call it a delicate constitution. In her world, there are phrases for everything, and each phrase is a curtain drawn over something more raw. She swings her feet to the floor. The boards are cold beneath her soles, sending a quick, honest shiver through her legs. She pulls a shawl around her shoulders, woolen and dark, and stands. The room seems taller when she is upright, the ceiling higher, the shadows deeper. Her vanity table waits near the window. its mirror reflecting only vague shapes until the light grows. But Eleanor does not go to the mirror first. She walks to the corner cabinet. It is not large. It is not grand. And yet, in a strange way, it is the most important piece of furniture in the room. The cabinet is made of dark walnut, with a small brass latch that catches the lamplight. It looks ordinary, respectable, the sort of thing any proper household might own. The lock is unnecessary. The contents are considered as harmless as tea. Eleanor kneels slightly, fingers touching the cool metal latch. The click is small, crisp, intimate. She opens the cabinet door, and a faint, mixed scent rises toward her herbal sweetness. Sharp alcohol, bitter powders, something floral meant to disguise something else. It is the scent of medicine in an era that trusts labels more than it trusts questions. Inside, bottles stand like quiet soldiers. Some are clear glass, showing amber liquid. Others are dark, to protect delicate contents from light. A few are ceramic jars with printed labels, their typography ornate and confident, as if the very font is a promise. Each container is a tiny declaration of modern progress. Each one whispers the same message. Relief is available, and it can be purchased. Eleanor's fingertips hover as she reads the labels. Soothing syrup, nerve tonic, cocoa wine, a small tin of tooth powder, a little pot of complexion cream, a vial of drops for the eyes. Each item suggests a different kind of care. Each one offers a different kind of reassurance. In the Victorian mind, reassurance is not indulgence. It is duty. A woman must be well enough to manage the household, to smile at guests, to remain pleasant even when her body feels like it is carrying invisible weights. She selects a bottle with a paper label that has been handled so often the edges are soft. The bottle is small enough to fit in her palm. The liquid within is a deep, warm brown, thick at the glass. When she tilts it, it moves slowly, like syrup. It's like honey, like something meant to comfort. The cap is metal, threaded, and it resists for a moment before giving way with a tiny squeak. The first scent is sweet, almost friendly. Eleanor pours a measured spoonful into a porcelain teaspoon. The spoon clinks lightly against the rim, a sound delicate enough to be mistaken for refinement. She raises it to her lips. The syrup coats her tongue, sweet at first, then carrying a bitter edge that disappears quickly. It warms her throat on the way down. She closes her mouth and waits. The waiting is part of the ritual. The waiting is the proof that she believes. Within minutes, she feels it not a dramatic change, not a bright flare, but a smoothing. The jagged corners of her inner unease soften. The tightness behind her ribs loosens by a fraction. Her thoughts slow, becoming less sharp, less insistent. The world feels easier to inhabit. She exhales, long and quiet. In her diary, Eleanor might write later that the syrup restores her tranquility. She might say it calms her nerves. She would not say it dulls her. She would not say it wraps her mind in cotton. She certainly would not say it trains her body to expect this sweetness every morning. She does not have those words. Her society does not offer them. She reaches for a second bottle. This one is slender, elegant, its label decorated with vines and a proud crest. It is marketed as a tonic for feminine vitality, a support for the modern woman. The liquid is lighter, almost golden, and it smells of wine, of cocoa, of something exotic and Peruvian, a term that glitters in advertisements like a jewel. Eleanor takes a small sip directly from the bottle. The taste is rich, almost pleasant. It is easy to imagine it as nourishment. It slides down with a warmth that blooms in her chest. For a moment, she feels a gentle lift, like a curtain being drawn back from a window. The room looks slightly clearer. The air seems less heavy. Her mind gains a thin thread of brightness. She sets the bottle down carefully, as if it were a delicate ornament. On the shelf beside it rests a jar of face cream. The lid unscrews with a quiet rasp. Inside, the cream is pale, smooth, faintly perfumed. Eleanor dips 2 fingers into it and rubs it lightly between them. The texture is cool. She applies it to her cheeks, her forehead, her chin, massaging in small circles as her mother taught her. As magazines instruct, as every woman learns, beauty is maintained through consistent care. A faint tingling begins. It is not unpleasant. It feels like awakening, like blood moving, like life itself responding. Eleanor watches her own reflection in the dim mirror, and she thinks she looks a little more alive already, a little more suited to the day. She cannot know that the tingling is not simply invigoration. She only knows the sensation and the comfort of explanation. On the lower shelf is the tooth powder. She takes the tin and opens it. A scent of mint rise, sharp and clean. Inside is a fine white powder. She taps a small amount onto her brush. The bristles scratch softly against enamel as she begins. Rhythmic and patient, the mint grows stronger, and with it, a strange clarity, as if her mouth has become a doorway for freshness to enter the mind. She rinses with cold water from the pitcher on her washstand, and the chill shocks her awake, more honestly than any tonic. She stands, her shawl falls into place. She smooths her nightdress as if it were already a day gown. The room still holds shadows, but she has begun her transformation. She has performed the small acts that signal readiness. In her world, readiness is not merely physical. It is moral. It is social. It is the obligation to appear serene. Eleanor closes the cabinet. The brass latch clicks again, neat and final. The cabinet becomes once more a simple piece of furniture, a respectable object. Yet, within it, the bottles remain, quiet, patient, certain that tomorrow morning will come again. As Eleanor steps toward the door, the corridor outside is still dim. She moves slowly, feeling the early effects settling into her, smoothing her edges, lifting her slightly, holding her in a gentle, manufactured calm. Downstairs, the kettle begins to whisper, and the first real scent of breakfast starts to rise. The day is beginning, and the secret, sealed in glass and label and trust, begins with it. Downstairs, the dining room waits in patient order. A long table stands beneath an unlit chandelier that still holds the faint window light in sleepy reflections. The place settings are arranged with exactness, white porcelain. A thin band of gold, a folded napkin, a spoon aligned as if alignment itself were a form of prayer. The house has its rituals, just as Eleanor has hers. When Eleanor enters, A small tray has already been set. A pot of tea breathes steam into the cool air. Toast rests on a plate beneath a cloth, and butter softens slowly, becoming glossy at the edges. No one speaks much. The servants move as quietly as they can, their footsteps careful, their voices kept behind their teeth. In a household like this, silence is part of the comfort. Eleanor sits and wraps both hands around her teacup. The porcelain is thin, delicate. She takes a sip, and the warmth moves into her chest. The earlier medicines are still working in their subtle ways, smoothing her thoughts, lifting her mood by small degrees. She feels capable, which is not the same as being well. But in 1885, capability is often the closest thing a woman is permitted to ask for. After breakfast, she crosses into the parlour, a room made for appearances. It smells of polished wood and faint dried roses. The curtains are heavy, and the light that enters is softened until it feels like velvet. On a small table lie ladies' magazines, bright covers and confident print, advertisements, promise, composure, brightness, steadiness, all delivered in bottles and jars. Doctors' names appear beside endorsements, and the typography itself seems to speak with authority. The words soothe even before the medicine touches the tongue. Eleanor pauses at the mantel, where a photograph of her husband stands. He is away this week in New York, moving through timetables and decisions. Eleanor remains in Boston, moving through calls, letters, and the quiet management of mood. She knows what is expected of her calm manners, pleasant speech, a face that does not reveal the weight beneath it. So she learns to translate every honest feeling into a polite phrase. Not, I am frightened, but my nerves are unsettled. Not, I am lonely, but I have been run down. And when the phrases are not enough, there is the cabinet. Always the sweet syrup, the cocoa wine, the creams and powders. Always the promise that relief can be measured, purchased and taken in secret, so that the world sees only serenity. Morning strengthens at the window. The frost line softens, and a brighter ribbon of light slips across the carpet. Eleanor watches it for a moment, then smooths her skirt, adjusts the shawl on her shoulders, and begins the day feeling steadier than she did an hour ago, and never guessing why. It is Philadelphia. Itsembabe Bashasen. The city carries a different rhythm than Boston, but the morning quiet feels the same, as if the whole eastern coast shares one slow breath before the day begins. Row houses stand shoulder to shoulder, their brick faces dark with night moisture. Gas lamps burn low at the corners of streets, halos of light floating in the mist. Somewhere a street sweeper drags a broom in steady strokes, and the sound is soft, almost like waves on a distant shore. In a respectable home near Rittenhouse Square, Mrs. Margaret Whitmore wakes to the faint creak of shutters and the gentle settling of the house around her. She is 32, with the composed beauty of a woman who has learned to arrange herself according to rules written by other people. Her hair is pinned, even for sleep, because surprise visitors are not impossible, and because habit, once formed, becomes its own kind of corset. She rises slowly, feeling the familiar heaviness behind her eyes, the faint tension in her jaw. the low hum of worry that never fully leaves. It is not named as anxiety. It is named as feminine sensitivity. It is treated as a problem of nerves. Margaret's room smells of starch and soap, of the faint floral water used on linens, and of coal, smoke carried upward from the kitchen stove. The light is thin and grey, filtering through lace curtains that soften everything they touch. A washstand waits with a pitcher of water, a bowl, a folded cloth. Beside it sits a small dish of powder, a brush, a comb. These are the ordinary tools of making oneself presentable. But the first tool Margaret reaches for is not the brush. It is the cabinet. Every respectable home has one now, and it is always stocked, not as a luxury, but as a requirement of modern life. The cabinet may be in a bedroom, a hallway, a pantry, or a vanity drawer. It is the quiet center of the household, the place where inconvenience is meant to be turned into comfort. Its shelves are lined with bottles the way a library is lined with books, each one promising an answer. Margaret opens her cabinet and pauses. The scent that rises is a familiar mixture: sweet syrup, sharp alcohol, bitter herbs, powdery perfumes meant to suggest purity. It is a scent that belongs to an era that believes progress can be poured into a spoon. She reads the labels slowly, not because she doubts them, but because the reading itself is reassuring. Printed words feel like certainty. Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, not intended for her child today, but for herself, for what she calls her unsettled constitution. She measures a spoonful, careful and neat. The syrup is thick, dark, and glossy. It tastes sweet, with a warm bitterness behind it. It slides down her throat like a promise. She waits, standing very still. The house is quiet enough that she can hear the faint ticking of a clock downstairs and the soft crackle of the stove. The waiting becomes a small meditation. She feels the edge of her inner unease soften. The world becomes slightly less sharp. Her thoughts slow, as if someone has turned a key and lowered the volume of her mind. Next, she reaches for a small jar of complexion cream. The cream is pale and cool. It carries a faint scent of violets, a scent that suggests innocence. She applies it with gentle circles, and a tingling begins, subtle at first, then more noticeable, as if her skin is waking up. Margaret interprets the sensation as vitality. She does not think of chemistry. She thinks of beauty. In the Victorian imagination, beauty is not only appearance, it is proof of moral order. At her vanity, she opens a tin of tooth powder. It smells of mint, bright and clean. She taps the powder onto her brush and begins to scrub, rhythmic and patient. The mint grows stronger. A strange clarity follows, and she feels, for a moment, almost cheerful. She spits and rinses, and the cold water shocks her mouth into wakefulness. Before breakfast, Margaret has already taken in more medicine than a modern mind would consider reasonable. And yet, in 1883, she is doing what she has been taught to do. She is following recommendations. She is meeting expectations, because expectations are everywhere. In the magazines on her parlor table, women are shown with smooth complexions and calm eyes. In church, sermons praise mothers who remain gentle and tireless. At social visites, Women speak softly about their nerves, their fatigue, their headaches, as if these are common weather patterns, as ordinary as rain. When someone mentions a tonic that helps, the mention is offered with kindness, the way one offers a shawl. Margaret moves through her morning as the house wakes around her. In the kitchen, the cook stirs porridge and the scent of oats rises. Warm and plain, a kettle begins to whisper. In the hallway, a maid brushes a rug with steady strokes, raising dust that smells faintly of wool. The home is an organism of small motions, and Margaret is expected to be its graceful centre. She eats her breakfast slowly. Toast, a soft egg, nothing too heavy. Victorian advice books warn that rich food can inflame the nerves. The idea of nerves has become a polite way to explain almost anything. If a woman feels sad, her nerves are delicate. If she feels angry, her nerves are inflamed. If she feels trapped, her nerves are exhausted. The solution is rarely rest or freedom. The solution is usually a bottle. After breakfast, Margaret prepares for the day's duties. She checks the household accounts. She writes a letter to her sister. She reviews the week's social calls, each one a small performance of calm. As she moves, she notices the gentle lift inside her, the quiet energy that feels like competence. She attributes it to discipline, to good habits, to proper living. She does not know that her body is learning patterns. It is learning that morning comes with sweetness, tingling, mint, and a subtle chemical shift toward feeling right. Later that afternoon, Margaret will visit a department store. She will pass counters filled with lace and gloves and perfume. And she will also pass, without surprise, a section devoted to medicinal preparations. The bottles will gleam under bright gaslight, arranged like jewels. Clerks will speak of them with confidence. Labels will promise health in ornate lettering. A respected physician's name will be printed beside the claim, as if authority itself can be bottled. Margaret will choose one new product, perhaps a nerve tonic for evenings, or a lozenge for the throat, or drops for the eyes that make them bright and wide. She will pay without hesitation, because in this era, these purchases are not seen as indulgence. They are seen as responsible, and so the cabinet will grow a little fuller, shelf by shelf, bottle by bottle, not through recklessness, but through trust, not through rebellion, but through obedience, a quiet obedience that makes the whole culture feel calm on the surface, even as beneath that surface, countless bodies begin to depend on the same sweet, invisible help as the day stretches. The early lift begins to thin. It does not vanish at once. It fades the way a scent fades in a room after a guest has left, lingering in corners, then disappearing so gradually it is difficult to say when it is gone. Margaret notices, in the mid-morning, a slight return of tightness behind her eyes. Her hands feel cooler. Her thoughts, which had seemed arranged in neat rows, begin to wander. She does not panic. She has been taught that such sensations are common for women, and the word common becomes a soft blanket placed over anything that might otherwise feel alarming. She steps into the kitchen for a moment. The warmth there is deeper than in the rest of the house. steam curls from pots, carrying the scent of broth and onions, and there is a faint, pleasant dampness in the air from boiling water. The cook speaks quietly about ingredients and timing. Margaret nods, offering small approvals, her mind half in the room and half elsewhere. She feels an urge for steadiness, a gentle wish to return to the earlier calm. In the cabinet, there is an answer. She takes a small spoonful of a nerve tonic, one that her physician recommended after a polite conversation in which she described her fatigue with careful restraint. The tonic tastes like wine and bitter herbs and sugar meant to disguise both. She swallows, and soon the world smooths again. It is an easy lesson. Discomfort appears. Medicine removes it. The pattern is simple enough to feel like wisdom. In the afternoon, she dresses to go out. A dark dress, gloves buttoned neatly, a hat pinned in place. She checks her posture in the mirror, not with vanity, but with duty. A proper woman is expected to look as if she has slept well, eaten well, and feels grateful for her life. The body must not betray the mind, and the mind must not betray the heart. Outside, Philadelphia has fully woken. The streets are busy now. Horses steam lightly in the cold air. Wagon wheels clatter. Voices rise and fall. A newspaper boy calls out headlines that blur into sound more than meaning. The city smells of coal smoke, damp stone, and bread from a bakery that has opened its door to let warmth spill out. Margaret walks with measured steps, letting the noise pass around her without entering too deeply. She arrives at a department store whose windows display fabric and ribbons in careful arrangements. Inside, gaslight turns everything warm. The air carries the scent of perfume and new cloth. People move slowly, as if walking through a place that requires manners to match its brightness. Margaret drifts past gloves, past lace, past rows of small combs and brushes. She hears the soft murmur of clerks, the polite laughter of women, the faint squeak of leather shoes on polished floors. And then, as naturally as if she is turning toward a familiar parlor, she reaches the medicinal section. Here the counters are lined with glass bottles in perfect ranks. There are creams and powders and syrups, tonics for energy and tonics for calm, remedies for cough and remedies for melancholy, drops for eyes and elixirs for digestion. The labels are ornate, confident, almost musical in their promises. They speak of science, of refinement, of modernity. They rarely speak plainly of what is inside. A clerk greets her with practiced gentleness. He does not treat these products as dangerous. He treats them as civilized necessities. He speaks of them the way one might speak of tea blends. This one is soothing. That one is invigorating. This one is especially suited to a lady's delicate nature. He gestures toward a bottle with a physician's name printed proudly across the label, as if the ink itself is a signature of care. Margaret holds the bottle and reads. The words feel formal and reassuring. She imagines a doctor in a clean coat, a man of learning, weighing ingredients with thoughtful precision. She imagines laboratories and careful study. She does not imagine factories producing thousands of bottles, or advertising men drafting phrases to match the anxieties of women they will never meet. The clerk mentions that many ladies purchase this tonic in pairs, so they do not run out. He says it without pressure, as friendly advice, Margaret nods. It seems sensible. In her home, running out of anything feels like disorder. She buys 2. As she leaves the store, the bottles are wrapped in paper and tied with string. They look like gifts. They do not look like risk. At home, the parcels join the cabinet. Margaret places them on the shelf with the others, arranging them with care. It is satisfying. The way arranging books on a shelf is satisfying. She sees her preparations as evidence of good management. She is not stockpiling trouble. She is stockpiling solutions. In the early evening, when the light outside turns the color of pewter, Margaret sits in the parlor and writes letters. The scratch of her pen is steady and soft. Ink glistens briefly, then dries. She writes about ordinary things, weather, family news, a neighbor's new baby, a sermon that was particularly moving. She does not write about the small tremor that sometimes visits her hands. She does not write about the sudden impatience that arrives without warning, or the nights when sleep feels distant and the mind refuses to settle. These things are private, and when they become too strong, there is always another bottle waiting behind a label. Later, when her husband looks across the dinner table, he will see her composed. He will see a neat home, a pleasant wife, an orderly meal. He will not see the cabinet as an engine of the household. He will see it as a sign of responsible care. He, too, has been taught to trust. And beyond this single home, in thousands of homes, the same pattern repeats. In Boston and Chicago, in small towns and large cities, cabinets fill with syrups and tonics. Catalogues arrive in the mail. Pages of remedies beside pages of dresses and kitchen tools, all offered with equal normality. Women trade recommendations in quiet voices, not as conspirators, but as friends. A remedy for fatigue, a syrup for nerves, a cream for beauty, a powder for confidence. The country begins to share a private routine, a spoonful in the morning, a sip in the afternoon, a dab on the cheeks, a dusting on the teeth. Small rituals that feel harmless because they are wrapped in manners and the language of care. And in Margaret Whitmore's cabinet, the shelves hold their quiet patience, waiting for tomorrow's dawn, when she will reach again for sweetness and certainty, and believe she is simply doing what a proper woman must do. By the time the decade reaches its middle years, the bottles in parlors and kitchen cupboards are no longer simply objects. They are habits. They are quiet schedules. They are small, private ceremonies performed in bedrooms and washrooms, performed behind closed doors with the same calm certainty as fastening buttons or smoothing a collar. And somewhere else, far from the soft rugs and lace curtains, another kind of room exists. It is a room where the air smells of ink and polished wood, where decisions are made not in whispers, but in carefully chosen sentences. A room where men in stiff collars lean over paper and speak about women they will never meet, not by name, not by story, but by category. Imagine, Detroit, Etienne Barbe Barchesu. Outside, the city is waking into a new age of industry. The streets are busy with wagons and steam, with cold smoke and the metallic scent of machinery. The sky is a pale sheet above rooftops, and the wind carries the faint grit of soot. In the distance, a factory whistle cuts the air, long and low, and the sound settles into the bones like a reminder that time is now measured by production. Inside, a tall brick building with narrow windows. A boardroom sits above the noise. The door is heavy. The hinges sound expensive. A brass plate by the handle carries a company name etched with confidence. When you step inside, the world changes. The air is warmer, stiller. The smell of smoke becomes a faint background note, replaced by the sharper scent of paper, wax, and cigar ash. A long table stretches down the center of the room. Dark wood rubbed to a shine, gaslight reflects in the grain, creating small pools of golden brightness. Along the table sit men in suits that fit like armor, their hair neat, their faces intent in the way of people who believe they are building something important. They are, but not the kind of importance their advertisements will claim. At the far end, an older man clears his throat. He has the look of authority, the kind that comes from being listened to. He taps a folder with one finger, a small gesture that silences the room. Inside the folder are words, not medical charts, not scientific findings, words meant to move hearts, to adjust behavior, to guide hands toward shelves and drawers and medicine cabinets, words meant to turn worry into purchase. Another man opens a ledger. He reads numbers in a tone that sounds almost devotional. Sales by region, growth in urban centers, a rise in orders from smaller towns, now connected by rail lines. The numbers are not just figures. They are proof that the nation is listening, that the nation is buying. Someone mentions the phrase modern woman. It is spoken with admiration and calculation at once. The modern woman, they say, is busy. The modern woman carries burdens. The modern woman needs help. The modern woman is anxious without admitting anxiety. She is tired without being allowed to rest. She is expected to be gentle even when her life is tight with demands. And then they smile, almost tenderly, because they have something to offer. Not comfort in the human sense, not community, not relief from unreasonable expectations. They offer a bottle. One man moves closer to the table and spreads out printed proofs for a magazine advertisement. The paper smells fresh, the ink still holding a faint sharpness. At the top is a headline in ornate lettering, something like "A remedy for the delicate constitution," or "Restore feminine tranquility," or "Strength for the overburdened wife." Beneath the headline is a story. A woman, drawn with soft lines, sits in a parlor with her hand to her forehead. She looks pale, refined, the very image of respectable suffering. In the next image, she stands upright and smiling, her cheeks faintly colored, her posture perfect, her eyes bright, a before and after, a small miracle in 2 panels. The men study the drawings as if studying a map. One of them says the first image needs more sadness, not too much, just enough to stir recognition. Another says the second image needs more serenity, because serenity sells. Someone suggests adding the phrase "physician recommended" in bold print, because those 2 words are a seal on the mind. Another man has been quiet, turning a small bottle in his hands. He holds it up so the gaslight catches the glass. The liquid inside gleams like amber. He speaks slowly, describing the product as if it is not merely a concoction, but a companion, a daily friend, a gentle support. He says the ingredients come from distant places, from jungles and fields and ancient traditions. and the room nods as if the story itself is a necessary spice. No one in the room says cocaine. They do not need to. They do not want to. Instead, they say natural Peruvian extract. They say invigorating botanical essence. They say refined cocoa preparation. They say concentrated poppy comfort. They say so many things that sound like nature and tradition and wisdom, even as the reality is chemistry and profit. Then the conversation turns to placement, not where the bottles go in a cabinet, but where the advertisement goes in a publication. They speak of women's magazines, of church newsletters, of pamphlets distributed at lectures and social meetings. They speak of reaching women in the places where women are expected to be gentle and receptive. They speak of finding the moments when a woman is alone with her thoughts and placing the solution directly in front of her eyes. A younger man, perhaps recently educated, perhaps proud of his modern ideas, mentions a campaign strategy. First, he says, they must teach the public what to fear. He does not say fear as if it is cruel. He says it as if it is practical. He speaks of a newly emphasized condition, something like kidney weakness, or nervous exhaustion, or feminine irregularity. He explains that once women begin to recognize these conditions in themselves, they will seek help, and the help will already have a name and a label and a price. The men nod again. Pleased, they are building a world where worry has a brand. In a corner of the room, a stack of letters lies tied with string. These are letters from customers, women writing in careful handwriting, thanking the company for relief. The letters are sincere. They are tender. Eva, they speak of a return to energy, a restoration of calm, a better ability to manage the household, to smile, to endure. The men read these letters aloud sometimes, not with mockery, but with satisfaction, because sincerity is useful, because it becomes another kind of advertisement. A man suggests printing testimonials, not all of them, of course, only the ones with the right tone, the ones that sound honest and hopeful, the ones that describe transformation without mentioning trembling hands or sleepless nights, the ones that praise the product as if praising virtue. Someone else suggests creating a women's correspondence department. A brilliant idea. They agree. Women can write about their symptoms, their worries, their private discomforts. They can feel heard, and in return, they will receive a gentle letter back, a letter that looks like care, a letter that recommends increased dosage. It is all done with politeness. There is no need for threats, no need for force. Victorian culture supplies the pressure. The company merely provides the object that fits the pressure like a key. Now imagine, far away from this boardroom, a parlor in Boston. A woman sits by a window, her hands folded in her lap. She has been feeling tired. She has been feeling vaguely unwell. She cannot say out loud that she feels trapped by expectation, or that the endless responsibilities of domestic life feel like a weight that never lifts. She can only say, in the acceptable language, that her nerves are delicate. She opens her magazine. On the page is the advertisement, the same soft drawing, the same promise, the same kind words about restoring tranquility and feminine strength. The copy is written as if the company understands her, as if the company has been listening in the quiet moments when she thinks no one notices her suffering. She believes it because she has been taught that a woman should not demand too much from the world. She should correct herself. She should improve herself. She should use the tools provided to become more pleasant. She sees the bottle as a tool. She does not see the boardroom. A few days later, she buys the product. She places it among her other bottles. She takes it according to instructions. She feels better, briefly, brightly, and she writes a letter of gratitude in the same careful script as the letters tied with string in the corner of the marketing room. And so the loop closes. In Detroit, men hold up the letter as proof of success. In Boston, a woman holds up the bottle as proof of progress. In between, an industry grows. The true genius of this system is that it spreads without noise. It spreads through quiet habits, through polite conversations, through the gentle authority of print, through the calm voice of a clerk behind a counter, through the recommendation of a physician who has been given samples and flattering attention. It spreads through the tender human desire to feel better. And in the heart of it all is a simple trick: make the medicine feel like kindness. Even the packaging participates in the dream. Labels are designed with vines and crests, with gold flourishes and ornamental frames. Bottles are shaped to look refined, not crude. They are meant to sit on a vanity and blend with perfume and brushes. They are meant to look like a civilized object, not a dangerous one. Because in Victorian life, danger is supposed to look dirty and wild. And this danger looks clean. In another city, another boardroom, another group of men discusses a new angle. They talk about scarcity, limited edition formulations, seasonal blends, a winter tonic, a spring revitalizer, a summer calm, an autumn restorative. They explain that if women believe a product is only available for a short time, they will buy more. They will store it. They will feel prudent for doing so. The men laugh softly at their own cleverness, but in a restrained way, because restraint is part of their culture too. One of them says, thoughtfully, that the future of medicine is not just medicine, it is persuasion. And as the gaslight flickers above their heads, as papers rustle and ink dries, they do not see themselves as villains. They see themselves as businessmen. They see themselves as pioneers. They see themselves as bringing modern solutions to modern problems. They do not see the women who will sit at a kitchen table in the afternoon, trembling slightly, reaching for another spoonful because something inside feels wrong without it. They do not see the children who will grow up believing that calm comes from a bottle. They do not see the slow transformation of a society that learns, day by day, to medicate its ordinary human feelings into something manageable and profitable. The boardroom empties eventually. Chairs scrape softly against the floor. Papers are stacked and tied. A clerk extinguishes the gaslight. The room darkens, but the decisions made here continue to travel outward like ripples across water. They travel into magazines. They travel into catalogs. They travel into mailboxes, into parlors, into small towns along the railroad line, into frontier stores where patent medicines sit beside flour and nails. They travel into the quiet spaces where women sit and think. And in those quiet spaces, the bottles wait, passionate and polite, shining softly in the light, promising to make a woman feel exactly as the world demands she must feel. Cheerful, never too emotional, always ready, even if readiness is borrowed, measured, and purchased one spoonful at a time. There is a particular kind of morning that Victorian homes seem to share. A morning made of small sounds. The soft scrape of a brush against a rug, the hush of a curtain being drawn back, the distant clink of a kettle lid, the steady drip of water into a basin. In those hours, the world feels slower, as if time itself is padded with wool. And in those mornings, one of the most honored duties begins: cleaning, not simply for comfort, but for meaning. In Victorian culture, a spotless home is not merely a pleasant home, it is a moral state. It is proof that a woman is attentive, disciplined, and worthy. It is evidence that she has control over her environment, even if she has little control over anything else. Now imagine Boston again. The day is cold and bright, and the kitchen windows hold a thin film of frost that turns the light into something silvery. The floor is scrubbed wood, worn smooth by years of work. A stove radiates heat, and the smell of coal mingles with soap and damp cloth. In the corner stands a cabinet, lower and wider than the elegant medicine cabinet upstairs, yet equally stocked. This cabinet holds cleaning products, bottles and tins, all with confident labels: Miracle Surface Cleanser, Heavenly Home Refresher, Vigor Scrubbing Compound, Brightening Solution for Household Perfection. Words that sound like prayer. Sarah Mitchell stands in front of the cabinet. She is a woman of tidy habits, not because she is naturally obsessed, but because she has learned that tidiness keeps judgment away. In her world, neighbors visit and notice. Mothers-in-law comment with gentle sharpness. Church ladies glance at windowsills, as if windowsills hold secrets. Sarah ties an apron around her waist, its fabric stiff with starch. She rolls up her sleeves. Her hair is pinned tight, because loose strands look careless. She opens the cabinet and reaches for a bottle marked Housewife's Helper. The label shows a smiling woman holding a broom as if it were a scepter. The copy on the back promises energy for the busy household manager. It is described as a digestive aid, a support for vigor, a gentle tonic for women who must do much. Sarah pours a generous swallow into a small glass. The liquid smells sweet and sharp at once, a scent like wine mixed with herbal syrup. She drinks. The warmth slides down her throat and settles in her chest. She waits, standing still with her hands on the cabinet door. Within minutes, she feels the familiar shift, not a wild rush, not something she would call intoxication, but a brightening. Her thoughts sharpen. Her body feels lighter. The morning's tasks, which had seemed like a long list, suddenly seem like a series of neat steps she can accomplish with ease. She closes the cabinet and turns toward the sink. A bucket waits. She fills it with hot water, and steam rises. Carrying the scent of soap, she adds powder from a tin labeled sparkling solution, watching it dissolve and cloud, turning the water milky. The sound of stirring is soothing. A soft swirl, as if the bucket holds a small storm that remains politely contained. Sarah dips her cloth and begins at the kitchen table. She wipes in long strokes, firm and steady. The cloth makes a faint squeak over the wood. The surface grows darker with moisture, then dries, leaving a shine. Sarah smiles slightly, pleased by the order she is creating. She moves with increasing speed, not because she is rushing, but because her body feels capable of it, almost eager. She reaches for a second bottle, misses, Beaton's all-purpose surface cleaner. She uncorks it and pours a small amount into her bucket. The scent changes. It becomes sharper, more chemical, yet still disguised by perfume. Her hands tingle slightly as she works, and she thinks, as so many women do, that the tingling is proof of effectiveness. She does not imagine absorption. She does not imagine the skin as a doorway. She only imagines cleanliness. The house begins to change under her hands. The stove is polished until it reflects the window light in soft, distorted shapes. The sink is scrubbed until it looks new. The cupboard doors are wiped and wiped again, because each wipe feels satisfying, like smoothing a wrinkle from a sheet. The floor is swept, then mopped, then scrubbed on hands and knees. Sarah's movements become rhythmic, almost trance-like. Scrub, rinse, polish, repeat. The rhythm is hypnotic, not only for the listener, but for Sarah herself. It is a kind of prayer of labor. As the minutes pass, Sarah's energy grows strangely abundant. She does not feel the strain in her shoulders the way she might have last year. She does not feel the dull ache in her lower back. She feels alert, focused, as if she could clean not only her kitchen, but the entire street. The sensation is not just physical. It touches her mind. Her thoughts move quickly, lining up tasks in bright sequence. She decides to reorganize the pantry while the floor dries. She empties shelves, wipes jars, arranges flour and sugar with a precision that feels almost pleasurable. She folds cloths by size. She aligns labels. She stacks plates with mathematical neatness. There is a strange comfort in this kind of control, and there is a strange danger too, but Sarah cannot see it. In another house, across town, another woman is doing the same. In Pittsburgh, Mary Henderson writes in a letter that she has scrubbed for hours without fatigue. In Hartford, women meet weekly to discuss housekeeping and share product recommendations. They bring bottles like offerings. They speak in the polite language of domestic improvement. But beneath their words are descriptions of effects. A product that makes you feel bright. A powder that makes you feel unstoppable. A cleaner that leaves you energized. They do not call it a high. They call it moral vigor. In those gatherings, the air smells of tea and perfume and chemical cleansers. Women sit with straight backs and polite smiles. They pass bottles discreetly, as if sharing recipes. They talk about applying a surface energizer twice daily. Not once. They speak of combining products for better results. And they laugh softly when someone says she felt capable of scrubbing her neighbor's floors too. They think they are sharing wisdom. They are sharing dependency. At home, Sarah continues. The morning becomes midday, and still she cleans. The windows are washed until the glass seems to disappear. Baseboards are wiped until they shine. The brass fixtures are polished until they glow warmly. The parlor, usually reserved for guests, is dusted with special care, because parlor dust is a kind of invisible insult to respectability. Sarah's hands move quickly. Her breath is steady. Her cheeks are slightly flushed. If someone visited right now, they might say she looks wonderfully healthy, wonderfully industrious. They might praise her dedication. They might suggest she must have found an excellent new product. Sarah would nod. She would recommend it. And so the loop continues. But beneath the surface, the body keeps its own records. After hours of scrubbing, Sarah's heart beats faster than it should. Her fingers tremble slightly when she pauses. Her mouth feels dry. She tells herself it is simply because she has been working hard. She tells herself she must drink more water. She tells herself it is the honest fatigue of duty. And when, later, the energy begins to fade, it does not fade gently. It falls away in uneven steps, leaving behind a hollow feeling. Her limbs suddenly feel heavy. The bright order in her mind becomes blurred. A faint sadness arrives, uninvited, and she cannot explain it. She sits for a moment in the kitchen chair, looking at the spotless floor. It shines so beautifully, and yet she feels strangely empty. In Victorian language, she calls this virtuous exhaustion. She tells herself she has worked so well that she has depleted her reserves. And what does she do when reserves feel depleted? She reaches again for a bottle, a restorative tonic, recommended for post-labor collapse. It tastes sweet and bitter, and within minutes, the hollow feeling softens. She feels steadier. She feels capable of preparing supper. She feels able to smile when her husband returns. The home remains calm. The pattern remains hidden. Even the children in the house absorb the atmosphere. They play on freshly cleaned floors. They touch polished furniture. They breathe air where cleaners have evaporated into the room. A little boy suddenly becomes unusually energetic, organizing his toys with obsessive focus. A little girl wipes a windowsill with fierce attention and says proudly that she is helping mother. Sarah smiles at their diligence. She tells herself she is raising good children. She does not imagine residues. She does not imagine contact. She only imagines virtue. In time, companies notice what women are doing. They notice the escalation. They respond with new products. Super strength domestic solutions. Professional grade household systems. Seasonal cleaning elixirs. Each one promises to help women achieve a higher standard of perfection. Each one is marketed as a tool of refinement. The catalogues display them beside kitchenware and dresses, as if all are equally ordinary. The language is always gentle. The labels are always elegant. The promises are always the same: you will be better, calmer, brighter, more capable. And women, trapped in expectations, wanting to be good, wanting to feel in control, take these promises into their hands like rosary beads. They scrub, they polish, they shine, they become, in the quiet way of habit, bound to the very substances that make their labor feel possible. As afternoon light slants through the parlor, dust motes float like tiny stars. The house smells of soap and lemon and something sharper beneath it. The floors shine, and the curtains hang perfectly. Everything looks peaceful. Sarah stands in the doorway, her apron damp, her hands slightly trembling, her heart beating a little too quickly. She looks at the spotless rooms and feels, for a moment, a strange kind of pride, not because she loves cleaning, but because the clean house proves she is doing what she must. And the products in the cabinet sit quietly, waiting, as patient as bottles in a medicine drawer, ready to offer their secret assistance again tomorrow morning. When the sun is pale and the floorboards are cold, and the world once again demands that a woman be perfect, the city has settled into its evening posture, the way a well-bred household settles its silver after dinner. Outside, the street is quiet. In that particular 19th century manner, hoofbeats softened by distance. A carriage wheel murmuring over stone, a late bell somewhere far enough away that it sounds like memory rather than sound. Inside, gaslight gathers in pools. It does not brighten the whole room the way modern light does. It chooses corners. It leaves long ribbons of shadow under chairs and along skirting boards. The air is warm near the flames and cool near the window. So the room seems to carry two temperatures at once, like a polite disagreement that no one mentions aloud. In an upper room, behind a door that closes with a careful click, a woman prepares for sleep the way her mother taught her, not as an ending, but as a ritual. The chamber smells faintly of starch, of lavender water, of wood warmed by lamps, and beneath that, the sweet medicinal note of bottles that have been opened and closed so many times the air has learned their names. A vanity sits near the window. The window pane is cool when the back of her hand brushes it, and the night beyond is deep and watchful, velvet dark with a thin seam of moonlight where clouds part and stitch themselves together again. She does not hurry. In this world, hurry is vulgar. She loosens the pins from her hair one by one, each small metal piece released with a soft, bright sound. Her hair falls in stages, a slow river over her shoulders. When she lifts her brush, the bristles whisper through strands that have been braided and coiled all day. Each stroke is counted, not because anyone is watching, but because counting is calming. 50 strokes, then 50 more. The mind settles when the hand repeats the same motion. On the vanity are the objects of her evening devotion, a porcelain jar with a lid that fits so snugly it sighs when it opens, a narrow bottle of clear drops, a paper-wrapped cake of powder, a little metal spatula, a cloth folded into a precise square, a silver-backed mirror that catches the gaslight and gives it back as a warm halo. Nothing about these things looks dangerous. They look like refinement made solid, like comfort arranged into a pleasing row. The jar holds a cream. When she lifts the lid, the scent rises roses, perhaps, and something sharper that pretends to be freshness. She dips the spatula, gathers a small pearl of paste, and warms it between her fingertips. The cream feels cool at first, then slick, then oddly alive as it thins. She spreads it across her cheeks with small circles, as instructed by beauty manuals that speak in the language of science, but are really speaking in the language of obedience. Circular motions to encourage vitality, gentle pressure to awaken youth, patience to achieve purity, words that imply the body is a garden that can be disciplined into bloom. Her reflection watches her do this with a patient face. The cream leaves a faint sheen, not quite oil, not quite dew. It tingles at the edges of her mouth and along the line of her nose. The sensation is not unpleasant. It is the sort of sensation that a marketer can turn into assurance. Tingling means it is working. Tingling means the invisible labor has begun. She has been trained to accept sensation as proof, and proof as comfort. She dabs more beneath the eyes, where the skin is thin and soft as paper. The tingling deepens, and the mirror shows her pupils widening slightly, drinking in the lamplight, giving her gaze that open, startled brightness so often praised as delicate. She has been told that a woman should look as though she is made of moonlight, as though she is perpetually surprised by the world and therefore never responsible for it. The products on this table help her do that. They do it quickly. They do it with certainty. Next come the drops. She tilts her head back a little, holds the bottle above one eye, and lets a single bead fall. Coolness spreads, then numbness, then an odd clarity, as if the room has snapped into sharper focus. She blinks slowly, carefully, the way one handles fine glass. She repeats it for the other eye, in a moment. Her gaze looks more luminous, and she feels, underneath the ceremony, a light lift in her thoughts. Not joy exactly, not even happiness, more like buoyancy, as if a weight has been moved a few inches to the side. She reaches for the powder. The paper crackles. She taps a little into the cap, lifts a small puff, and dusts it along her hairline, the sides of her nose, her chin. The powder smells faintly of violets. It settles into pores, smoothing them the way snow smooths a field. When she exhales, the finest cloud rises and disappears. Her throat feels briefly cool, then warm, then oddly empty, as if air has changed its texture. She is not thinking of chemistry. She is thinking of appearing composed at breakfast, the way a proper household appears composed, even when its rooms hold quiet troubles. On a tray are other bottles, each with a name that sounds like a promise: complexion, miracle; eye brightener, youth restorer; nerve smoother, evening tranquility. Words that do not describe ingredients, only outcomes. In this era, outcome matters, because outcome is what a woman is measured by. Calm face, bright eyes, gentle mood, smooth skin. The world is allowed to be harsh. She is not. As she works, she hears the house settle. Somewhere below, a servant carries a tray. The soft clink of porcelain. A door closes with a muffled thud. The furnace sighs. The gaslight hisses, steady and patient. Her own breathing becomes the most prominent sound in the room, a quiet tide in and out. The ritual is doing what it is meant to do. It is narrowing the world to a sequence of small actions. She thinks, faintly, of the day, a visit to a neighbor, the careful conversation, the small laughter at the right moments, the way her hands felt restless in her lap as she sat, the way her thoughts tried to run ahead of the words she was allowed to say. There are many feelings in a woman, but only a few are permitted to appear. This, too, is part of the reason the bottles sell so well. They do not simply alter the body. They offer a way to be acceptable. Her mother taught her the structure of this. Her mother learnt it from her mother. The first applications came when she was young, when a blemish was treated as an emergency and a blush was treated as a warning. Later, when she entered society, she learned the sharper rule: a face is a mask, and the mask must be maintained. The vanity table became the altar where maintenance occurs, and the products became a kind of quiet education in what must be hidden. She rinses her hands in a bowl of water that has cooled. The water carries away a faint cloud of fragrance and something more metallic, though she would not name it as such. She pats her fingers dry on the cloth and smooths it back into a square. Everything in its place, even her doubts, folded neatly. There is a small bottle she saves for nights when her mind feels too loud. It is labeled as a tonic for the nerves, a gentle evening companion. The glass is dark. The label is ornate. The cap is wrapped in foil like a sweet. She pours a teaspoon into a little cup. The liquid smells of wine and herbs. She sips. It warms her throat and spreads through her chest like a slow ember. The room does not change. but her relationship to it changes. The shadows seem less sharp. The corners feel less watchful. Her thoughts slow and smooth, as if they have been combed. This is the part no one mentions in advertisements. Though everyone quietly understands, the products are not just about skin. They are about sensation, about regulation, about creating a woman who can endure expectations without making anyone else uncomfortable. In the mirror, she sees a face that looks serene. She feels inside a gentle lift and a gentle hush occurring at the same time. An unusual combination she has come to associate with being well. She has been told this is health. She has been told this is proper feminine balance. She has been told it is modern science, working kindly on her behalf. Outside, the night continues. A breeze moves against the window, and the curtains shift slightly, as if the room is breathing along with her. The gas flame wavers, then steadies. She stands and moves toward the bed, the hem of her nightgown brushing the rug with a soft, dry whisper. Before she lies down, she pauses at the edge of the mattress and smooths the coverlet with both hands, pressing out invisible wrinkles. It is a small gesture of control, a small insistence that the world can be arranged. The bed smells of clean linen and faint soap. When she sits, the mattress gives a little, accepting her weight. In the distance, a clock begins to mark the hour. Each chime is separated by enough silence to let it sink into the body. She listens without counting, letting the sound move through her like slow waves. Her eyelids feel heavier, not suddenly, but gradually, as if the ritual's been laying down layers of calm, one thin layer at a time. And in this gentle descent toward rest, there is something else, something she would not say aloud, a sense that she is being carried by forces she cannot see. Not just tradition, not just fashion, something in the jars, something in the powders, something in the sweet, confident promises printed on labels, something that makes the night feel soft and makes her thoughts drift and makes her believe, for a little while, that the world is kinder than it truly is. She turns the gas lower, and the light becomes a small golden eye. The room is now mostly shadow. The mirror no longer shows her clearly. It shows only a pale shape, and the faint glimmer of a jar, and the curved neck of a bottle catching the last of the flame. In the hush, the beauty ritual ends. The chemical story, unseen, continues. All day her corset has held her ribs like a firm, pulita haunt, keeping her breath small and her posture perfect. Now, as the laces have been loosened and the pressure is gone, her lungs expand with a slow, surprised ease. The body, finally allowed to soften, accepts the medicines more readily. The mind, finally allowed to wander, accepts their gentle persuasion as kindness. The curtain shifts once in a mild draft, and the room seems to breathe with her. In and out, in and out. She remembers the magazines that arrive folded and fragrant with ink. The pages are thin and they sigh when turned. Women are drawn with impossible smoothness, cheeks like porcelain, eyes bright as if lit from within. The articles speak of virtue and cleanliness, of self-care as duty, of the home as a temple and the wife as its quiet keeper. The words are gentle enough to slip past resistance, a touch of Peruvian extract to enliven the spirit, a botanical refreshment to preserve composure. a daily habit that supports feminine steadiness. On the vanity, near the edge, lies a small notebook with a ribbon marker. It is not a dramatic diary, only a domestic record menus, expenses, calling visits, reminders for mending. Yet in the margin she sometimes adds a line about herself, written as if it were weather, felt light after the drops. Hands trembled at 4 until tea, unease when the bottle seemed low. She does not write the word craving. She writes need because need sounds practical, and practical is safe. She thinks of the first day she bought the cream, standing at a department counter under bright gaslight. Glass jars were stacked like little gifts. A clerk in a clean collar spoke with rehearsed certainty, the way a minister speaks of comfort. Ladies adore it. He said, it calms the complexion and the spirit. She remembers how she wanted, almost desperately, to be calm, not only on her face, but in her life. Now, in the dim room, she understands the calm is real. It arrives. It wraps her. It feels like relief. And because it feels like relief, she trusts it. She slides under the coverlet. The sheets are cool and smooth, and they hold her without demand. Her hands rest softly together, and she listens to her breathing and the faint hiss of the lowered flame. Somewhere in the city, another woman is rubbing the same sort of cream into her cheeks. Another is lifting a spoon of sweet syrup for nerves. Another is powdering her face to appear serene. The rituals are private, and yet shared, repeated in hundreds of rooms, as common as prayer. The shared repetition makes it feel normal. If everyone is doing it, how could it be harmful? The clock finishes its chime, and the silence after it is wide and calm. She drifts further, and the vanity table recedes, though the bottles remain where they are, waiting, patient, certain, promising that tomorrow, again, they will help her become the version of herself the world has asked for. The night folds over her like a dark shawl, and the last thing she notices is the faint scent of violets on her skin, sweet and clean, covering everything else. The way a polite smile covers a thought that must not be spoken. Morning arrives in Boston with a pale, careful light, the kind that seems filtered through lace even before it reaches the windows. The streets are damp from a night mist, and the stones hold the cold in their seams. Somewhere a milk cart rattles. A horse exhales a white cloud, and a bell rings once, a thin sound carried by air that tastes faintly of coal smoke and sea salt. In Beacon Hill, behind brick facades and iron railings, Mrs. Catherine Pemberton prepares to leave her house. She has dressed with the same precision she uses for everything buttoned cuffs. Collar smoothed, gloves folded over one another like quiet hands. Her veil is light, meant more for decorum than concealment. Yet today it feels like a small kindness. Her face has the calm that society expects, but beneath the calm is a grief that is heavy and wordless. A grief that does not fit into sentences the way shopping lists and calling cards do. A carriage takes her through streets that are waking slowly. She watches the city without truly seeing it. Shop shutters lift. A boy sweeps a stoop. A woman shakes a rug from a second-floor window. Dust falling like soft ash. All of it looks ordinary. and that ordinary world makes her sorrow feel strange, like an object she has hidden under her coat. The physician's office is on a quiet street where the houses look respectable enough to reassure the anxious. The brass plate beside the door catches the morning, polished to a mirror shine. When Catherine steps inside, the air changes. It is warmer, thick with the scent of leather chairs, lamp oil, and the sharp sweetness of disinfectant that only half conceals the human presence that has passed through this room. There is also the scent of paper and ink, and of something medicinal. A faint note that seems to cling to the curtains like perfume. She is shown into a waiting room, furnished to suggest calm, heavy curtains to soften sound. A table with periodicals. A clock that ticks with unwavering patience. The ticking is almost hypnotic. It invites the mind to measure time, and in measuring time, to forget it. Catherine sits and folds her hands, and feels the weight of her gloves as if they were stones. When the door opens, Dr. Cornelius Whitman greets her with practiced gentleness. His beard is neat, his voice is low, confident, shaped by years of being believed. He gestures her into his consulting room, a space that balances comfort and authority. A burgundy leather chair faces his desk. Shelves hold books with gold titles. A skeleton model stands in one corner like an assistant who never speaks. On the desk lies a leather-bound pad, a pen, a small glass bottle, and a box of sample vials arranged with the tidy pride of a display. Catherine sits where she is told. The chair gives slightly beneath her, and the leather holds the warmth of the room. Doctor, Whitman asks questions that sound medical but are also moral in their shape. How have you been sleeping? How is your appetite? Do you find yourself weeping? Do you feel a heaviness in your chest? Have you been able to perform your household duties? Each question contains an assumption that the proper end of feeling is function, and that function is the proof of health. Catherine answers carefully. She speaks of fatigue, of a mind that will not settle, of sudden tears that arrive without warning and embarrass her in front of servants. She does not speak of the true shape of her grief, because it has no polite vocabulary. She does not say, "I miss my child so fiercely that I cannot bear the silence of the nursery." She says instead, "I have been nervous." Dr. Whitman nods as if this confirms what he already knows. His expression is sympathetic and yet also relieved, because nervousness is a category, and categories can be treated. He opens his pad, dips the pen, and begins to write with steady strokes. The sound of the pen on paper is soft, a tiny scratching that feels strangely soothing in the quiet room. He explains his plan in the tone of someone offering a solution that is both scientific and kind. A tonic, he says, to strengthen the nerves and lift the spirits. A restorative, to regulate emotion. A powder, for moments when the heaviness becomes acute. He does not say what is in these bottles. He says what they will do. He says, "You will feel like yourself again." Catherine listens, and she wants to believe him. Wanting to believe is a kind of surrender. And in that moment, she is tired enough to surrender. Her grief has been judged again and again as too much. The doctor is offering a way to make it smaller, quieter, easier for everyone else to live with. That sounds like mercy. He hands her a small card with the prescriptions written in precise lines. The ink looks official, and officialness feels like safety. He also hands her a sample bottle, a dark glass vial with a label that curls in ornate script. He tells her to begin immediately. Morning, noon, and late afternoon. Keep it consistent. Consistency is the key to balance. When Catherine leaves the office, the air outside feels colder than before. The street sounds sharper, but in her hand, the small bottle warms slightly as her fingers hold it. It is light, and yet it has the weight of promise. At home, she sets it on the vanity beside her hairpins. The household moves around her. A servant asks about luncheon. A child's voice echoes in the hallway of a neighbor's house through an open window, and the sound pierces her like a needle. She turns away from the window and returns to the bottle. She measures the first dose carefully, as if precision can protect her. The liquid tastes sweet and herbal, with a sting beneath the sweetness that makes her throat tingle. Within minutes, she feels a change, not as a dramatic wave, but as a gentle adjustment of the world. The edges of her thoughts become less jagged. The heaviness lifts a fraction. She feels, for the first time in weeks, an illusion of space inside her chest. She cleans. She writes notes. She speaks to a visitor without feeling her voice shake. She is grateful. Gratitude, in this era, is expected from women, and she gives it easily to the doctor, to the bottle, to the idea that her suffering has been named and therefore can be managed. Days pass, measured by clocks and dosages. The bottle becomes part of her schedule the way tea and prayer are part of other schedules. When the effects begin to fade, she notices the fade, the way one notices the room cooling when a fire burns low. She reaches for the next dose with the same calm logic if the fire cools. You add a log in Dr. Whitman's office. Weeks later, Catherine reports improvement. She smiles because she is supposed to. She describes clarity, energy, a return to duty. Dr. Whitman is pleased. He adjusts the prescription upward slightly, not because he is cruel, but because he is certain. Certainty is his profession. He has read articles in respectable journals. He has listened to representatives who speak of scientific progress. He has seen other women leave his office calmer, brighter, grateful. He believes he is doing good. Catherine does not notice. At first, the small changes that creep in around the edges, a restless sensation in her hands, a quickness in her speech when she visits a friend, a sudden irritability when a maid moves too slowly, a night when sleep will not come, and she sits in the parlor after midnight with the lamp turned low, staring at the wallpaper as if it is trying to tell her something. In the morning, she attributes these to nerves, and the bottle promises help for nerves. So she takes a little more. The pattern deepens gently, the way a path deepens in a field when many feet cross it. The body learns. The mind learns. The interval between doses feels longer than it used to. She begins to keep extra vials in her purse, wrapped in cloth so they do not clink. She tells herself it is simply preparedness, the way a woman keeps pins and smelling salts. In the quiet hours, when the house is still, she sometimes remembers her child with a sudden sharpness that surprises her, as if the grief has been waiting behind a door. The medicine does not erase it. It changes its shape. It lifts her mood and it lifts her speed. and the grief, still present, now has nowhere to settle. It becomes agitation. It becomes a need to move, to rearrange, to polish, to speak, to do something with the energy that has been poured into her veins. Dr. Whitman sees only that she is functional. Society sees only that she is composed. Catherine herself begins to believe that this is health. She believes because belief keeps her upright. And in those first months, when the medicine seems like a gentle bridge across a dark river, it is very hard to imagine that the bridge might also be a trap. The gas light in the doctor's office burns steady. The ink dries on the prescription cards. The bottles fill and empty and fill again, and the city continues its quiet routines. While one by one respectable women learn to hold their lives together with measured spoonfuls of a sweetness they do not understand, there is, in this period, a particular kindness in paperwork. A prescription has the look of order. An order feels like rescue. Catherine takes the card to the pharmacy where the air is dense with camphor and soap, where shelves of amber glass turn the gaslight into honey. The pharmacist measures powders on a small scale that balances like a tiny seesaw. He wraps bottles in brown paper, ties them with string, and stamps the parcels as if sealing an agreement. No one speaks of danger. Few people even have a word for it. They speak instead of habits, of constitution, of weakness and strength. If a woman feels unwell without her tonic, the explanation is simple. She must continue, for she is delicate. Delicacy is treated like destiny. At home, Catherine creates a small system, a spoon set aside for medicine, a cloth for wiping the bottle mouth, a place in the cabinet where the labels face forward like obedient faces. The routine becomes a quiet companion. She takes her dose at the same chair by the same window, so the light always falls the same way on the liquid, and the mind can pretend sameness equals safety. She begins to notice, too, the way conversation changes when she mentions her doctor's recommendations. Friends lean in with interest. They ask for the name of the tonic. They trade stories in low voices, as if discussing recipes. One woman confesses she takes a powder for melancholy afternoons. Another admits she relies on drops for social steadiness. The soft laughter that follows is a form of permission. If everyone needs a little help, then need becomes normal. Dr. Whitman, in his office, receives visitors of another kind. Men in clean suits who smell faintly of cigars and printing ink. They bring pamphlets, samples, invitations to lectures in hotel ballrooms. They speak of modern chemistry and the physician's duty to keep pace with progress. They flatter him with titles. They offer, casually, a small consulting fee, a case of samples, a discounted shipment for personal evaluation. Nothing that looks like corruption in the bright light of politeness. He tells himself he is being supported in his work, and that support feels like proof. Catherine attends a modest tea one afternoon. The room is warm and smells of bergamot and polished wood. Conversation moves gently, meant to, yet Catherine feels her heart quicken with a bright, unreasonable energy. Her words come easily. She laughs faster than she intended. She notices the wallpaper pattern with an intensity that feels almost intimate. The feeling passes, but it leaves behind a thin emptiness, like the room after guests have gone and the candles burn low. She takes an extra dose that evening and tells herself it is only to stay steady. Weeks pass again. Her tolerance grows in quiet increments. Doctor, Whitman interprets her need for higher doses as evidence her condition is persistent. Catherine interprets her discomfort between doses as evidence she is still fragile. Both interpretations lead to the same solution: more, and still, from the outside, she appears improved. She moves through her days with a smoothness that earns compliments. You are looking better. Someone says, how marvelous that modern medicine can do such things. Catherine smiles and thanks them, because she does not know how to explain that the improvement feels real, and that the cost is invisible. And that invisibility is precisely what makes it possible. Some days, in the middle of a bright afternoon, she catches herself drifting toward the nursery door. As if her feet remember a life her mind is not permitted to hold. The handle is cool beneath her palm. The room beyond is silent, orderly, too clean. Her throat tightens, and her hands tremble, not from cold, but from that strange mixture of sorrow and stimulation. She steps back, reaches for the cabinet, and tells herself she is only keeping steady. The bottle waits, and she learns, quietly, to wait for the bottle. By the time the decade leans toward its final years, the city has learned a new kind of quiet. It is not the quiet of empty streets, but the quiet of habits that have become so ordinary they no longer announce themselves. Bottles arrive in parcels, wrapped in brown paper. Labels curl at the edges from steam and fingertips. Spoons are rinsed and set aside beside porcelain basins. A woman slips a vial into her purse as naturally as she slips on gloves. A physician writes a prescription with the same calm rhythm he uses to sign holiday cards. And all of it happens under the same warm illusion of respectability, as if anything ordered politely must therefore be harmless. Yet beneath that warmth, something begins to strain. It begins, often in small household moments. A kitchen maid pauses because her mistress has called her name twice in the span of a single minute. Voice sharpened by impatience that seems to arrive from nowhere. A child watches his mother pace the parlor, hands clasped and unclasped, as if she is trying to smooth the air itself. A husband notices that the cheerful brightness at breakfast sometimes turns to a flat, distant stare by late afternoon, and that this change can be reversed, almost like a lantern being relit by a private visit to a cabinet shelf. For Catherine Pemberton, it begins as a peculiar restlessness, a sensation like a clock spring wound too tight. She wakes before dawn, not because she is refreshed, but because her mind is already moving. The room is still dim, the curtains drawn, the house wrapped in sleep. Yet she feels awake in a way that is not gentle. There is a brightness behind her eyes, a thin tension in her jaw. She lies still and listens. The house at this hour has its own music. Pipes tick softly as they cool. A floorboard settles with a muted complaint. Somewhere a servant turns in a narrow bed and sighs. Outside, a cart creaks in the distance, and the sound fades as if it has been swallowed by fog. Catherine's breathing is the loudest thing in the room, and she tries to make it slow, because slow breathing is what calm women do. But her breath remains slightly high, slightly quick, like a bird that cannot quite fold its wings. She reaches for the bottle on the bedside table. In earlier months, she would have waited until after washing and dressing, as if ceremony itself could keep medicine in its proper place. Now the waiting feels like an unnecessary cruelty, a test that serves no purpose. She measures the dose in the half-dark, the liquid catching a sliver of moonlight. It tastes sweet, herbal, and then sharp. The familiar warmth spreads. The tension loosens a fraction. Her mind smooths like fabric pulled taut. It would be easy at this point to believe that the bottle is saving her. By mid-morning she is brisk, efficient, almost radiant. She writes letters in a neat hand. She oversees luncheon preparations. She speaks to visitors with a serene smile that holds steady in the corners, as if pinned there. She hears compliments, and the compliments feel like proof that she is recovering, proof that she is doing well, proof that Whitman is right. But the hours between doses become increasingly visible, as if time itself is growing sharper edges. Around 3, she begins to feel a faint tremor in her fingers. It is small at first, like a tremble from cold, except the room is warm. She wraps her hands around a teacup, pretending she simply wants comfort. The tea smells of bergamot and steam, and for a moment the scent is soothing, the way familiar linens are soothing. Yet her heart beats just a little too hard against her ribs. Her thoughts begin to dart. She tries to read, but the words on the page seem both too slow and too loud. She looks up and finds that the angle of light on the wallpaper feels irritating, as if the room itself has become slightly misaligned. A maid asks a simple question, and Catherine answers too sharply. The maid's eyes flicker downward, and shame rises in Catherine's chest like heat. She tries to soften her voice, to apologize, to return to the woman she believes she should be. But the softness will not stay. It slides away, and she hears herself speaking as if from a few inches away, a voice slightly harder than her own. She takes her afternoon dose. The relief is immediate enough to feel like tenderness. It is not only the easing of symptoms, but the return of a self she recognizes. She becomes less jagged. The edges blur again. She can speak more gently. She can listen. She can perform the quiet art of being pleasant. It is a frightening kind of relief, because it feels like truth. It feels like coming home. It is in this cycle that the hidden logic of dependency begins to show itself, not as a sudden cliff, but as a gentle slope that a person may walk down without noticing. At Dr. Whitman's office, similar patterns appear in other women. They sit in the waiting room, skirts arranged, hands folded, faces composed, yet they hold themselves with a certain tightness. Their eyes shine too bright. Their pupils are too wide in the lamplight. When the doctor speaks, they listen with a focus that feels almost hungry. They nod quickly, as if nodding can shorten the distance between this moment and the moment of relief. The doctor, to his own mind, is witnessing diligence. He is witnessing patience committed to improvement. He is witnessing modern medicine working. In the hospitals, however, a different kind of picture forms. It begins with admissions that puzzle young nurses. Women arrive with trembling hands, damp foreheads, and a fluttering agitation that does not fit the neat categories of fever or infection. They plead for their medicines with a desperate politeness, as if ashamed of their own urgency. They are dressed well, their hair pinned, shoes buttoned, yet their bodies behave as if some internal engine has lost its rhythm. A physician like William Osler, trained to observe with care, begins to collect these cases as one might collect strange shells from a shoreline. Each one is slightly different, yet the shape of the suffering repeats. A woman from Baltimore arrives after her family has tried to save money by reducing her tonic. She is weeping one moment, laughing the next. Her pulse races, her hands shake. When told she must rest, she becomes frantic, insisting that rest is impossible without her remedy. Another woman from Philadelphia collapses during church, pale and sweating, and then begs for a particular bottle as soon as she regains consciousness. An elegant widow from New York cannot stop moving her feet beneath the bed covers, as if her legs are trying to walk away from her own body. She has been an admired hostess for years, the kind of woman whose dinner table is praised for its calm beauty. And now she clutches a nurse's sleeve and whispers that she cannot bear the hours without her drops. The older physicians call it nervous collapse, or hystery, or feminine weakness. They prescribe, as they have always prescribed, more of what has become familiar. A little stimulant for the morning, a little sedative for night, a powder for emergencies, a cordial that warms the chest and quiets the mind. The intention may be kind, but the effect often deepens the pattern. The cycle tightens. Outside the medical world, the women themselves begin to whisper. In parlors and sewing circles, in the quiet, after tea is cleared, they trade small observations. It is never spoken as accusation. It is spoken as worry. Do you ever feel dreadful if you miss a dose? Do you ever wake too early with a terrible unease? Do you ever find your hands trembling? Do you ever feel as if you are not quite yourself, unless the bottle has been taken? Some women laugh softly and say, "Oh, that is only nerves." Others fall silent because the question has touched something tender. In Brooklyn, in modest rooms warmed by coal stoves, the Women's Christian Temperance Union holds meetings that smell of wool coats and tea. Their original mission is familiar to guard families from alcohol. Yet, more and more, letters arrive describing a different kind of dependency, wrapped in respectability, stamped with medical authority. One woman writes that her husband praises her calm, yet she fears the calm belongs to the bottle, not to her. Another writes that her child has become strangely energetic after playing on freshly scrubbed floors, and she wonders if the cleaning compounds could be doing something more than polishing. Another confesses that she has tried to stop her tonic, and the stopping felt like falling into a cold river, shock after shock, with no shore in sight. These women do not have the language of modern addiction, but they have the language of lived experience, and experience has its own clarity. Frances Willard, steady and patient, reads the letters by lamplight. The paper smells of smoke and ink. Each letter is a small voice from a different town, yet the pattern is the same. The pattern begins to feel like a map, and she has the rare ability to see that maps can be used not only for travel, but for action. She begins quietly. She organizes circles of education, not protests, not public battles, at least not yet. Small gatherings where women share what they know, compare labels, and learn to recognize euphemisms, Peruvian extract, poppy essence, fortified wine, nerve support. Each phrase becomes less magical once it is spoken plainly. Once it is placed on the table, like an object that can be examined. A few female physicians, often dismissed in their own time, offer a different kind of authority. They listen to women's reports with respect. They notice the correlation between increased doses and increased distress. They speak carefully of habituation, of tolerance, of the way the body learns and then demands. They do not shout. They do not shame. They speak as one might speak to someone waking from a long dream. In homes like Catherine's, this knowledge arrives slowly, like dawn through heavy curtains. She hears a neighbor mention that she has begun reducing her tonic. She hears that the first days were awful, but that afterward her mind felt clearer. The idea both intrigues and terrifies her. Clearer mind. Awful days. The words sit together like a riddle. One evening, Catherine stands before her cabinet and realizes, with a small, cold shock, that the bottle is nearly empty. The household funds are not endless, and there have been expenses. She cannot simply send for more without notice. The emptiness of the bottle feels larger than it should. It feels like a threat, like a door quietly closing somewhere in the house. She tells herself she will wait until morning. She tells herself she is a disciplined woman. That night, the waiting becomes a lesson. At first, it is only discomfort, a thin unease, as if the air in the room is wrong. She turns on her pillow and tries to settle. The sheets feel too warm, then too cold. Her thoughts begin to loop, returning again and again to the cabinet. She hears the distant tick of a clock and finds it unbearable. Each tick like a tiny hammer. Her heart beats fast. Her skin feels damp. Her hands tremble when she lifts them. She sits up, then lies down, then sits again. Her mind searches for an explanation that is not frightening. Perhaps she has caught a chill. Perhaps she is simply overtired. Perhaps she ate too little at supper. She tries to build little walls of reasoning, but the unease slips through. Yet the simplest explanation waits behind all the others. Quiet and undeniable, she needs the bottle. At dawn, she takes the last measured dose. Relief washes through her body, soft and immediate. She nearly cries from gratitude. The gratitude frightens her more than the symptoms did. It feels too large for a mere medicine. It feels like devotion. In that moment, the bottle changes in her mind. It is no longer only medicine. It is something she must not lose. And once a person realizes that, once that realization settles into the bone, the world begins to look different. The cabinet becomes an object of attention. The schedule becomes a set of rails. The hours between doses become something to manage, to endure, to soften. And the calm that society praises becomes, quietly, a performance supported by chemistry. In the wider world, the same realization is spreading, woman by woman, letter by letter, diary line by diary line. It is spreading not as a public storm, but as a private awakening, the kind that begins in silence, and therefore cannot be easily stopped. In the evenings, when the day's demands soften and the streets take on their amber glow, the city seems almost innocent. Gas mantles hiss gently behind glass. Snow, when it comes, muffles the hoofbeats and turns every corner into a quiet curve of light. Even in spring, there is a damp sweetness in the air. The smell of thawing earth mixed with coal smoke and the faint, clean bite of soap from freshly washed steps. Women walk home from visits with their collars turned up, their footsteps steady, their breath forming small clouds that vanish at once. In such calm scenes, no one would guess that behind closed doors, in bedrooms and parlours, many hands are measuring little spoonfuls with the care of prayer. No one would guess how much of this softness is being purchased minute by minute, duese by duese. The gas lights continue to glow, the bottles continue to sell, the doctors continue to write, yet under all of it, the first threads of resistance are being woven, slow and careful, like lace, and as with lace, the pattern is delicate, but once it exists, it is hard to unsee. There is a moment in every long season of habit when the air changes, not with thunder, not with a sudden shout, but with a subtle shift that makes familiar things feel newly strange. In the early years, a bottle on a vanity can be admired like a small ornament. In the later years, it begins to look like what it is, a promise, a routine, a dependency, and sometimes a quiet fear. As the new century approaches, the streets of the great cities continue to fill with motion. Electric streetcars glide along tracks, their bells clear and bright in the damp air. Newspapers thicken, heavy with ink, folded under arms, as men hurry to offices and women step into department stores where perfume, powder, and patent remedies are sold side by side. Window glass reflects rows of gaslights and the pale faces of shoppers who pause to read labels without quite knowing why. Yet inside many of those calm bodies there is a restless chemistry, a small hidden tide that rises and falls with the hour. In Boston, Catherine Pemberton has begun to notice how narrow her days have become. Not narrow in activity, for she is still busy, still managing the 1,000 small tasks that keep a household afloat, but narrow in the sense that the center of her attention is always the same. When will the next dose be taken? How much remains? What will happen if a shipment is delayed? How to keep her hands steady during tea? How to smile when the heart suddenly flutters? How to answer a simple question without an edge that startles her afterward? She does not speak this aloud, not even to herself. She speaks instead in the approved language of the era. Nerves, exhaustion, a delicate constitution, a tendency toward melancholy, words that sound dignified and therefore feel safer. But the safety begins to crack when the world itself becomes curious. It happens partly because of women like Frances Willard, who have gathered so many private stories that the stories begin to resemble evidence. It happens partly because of physicians like Mary Putnam Jacobi, who insist on listening to what their patients actually describe rather than what textbooks claim. And it happens partly because journalists begin to notice a strange contradiction. The most respectable advertisements in the most respectable publications are selling remedies that behave in the body, like chains that have been polished until they shine. The newspapers do not begin with chemistry lessons. They begin with grief that can be spoken aloud. A story about a child, a story about a syrup, a story about a mother who believed she was doing the kind thing and learns, too late, that she was quieting her infant with narcotics. Such stories are easy to repeat because they are simple and because they strike at the tender center of family life. Once that center has been touched, the public begins to look back into its own cupboards and drawers. Women turn bottles in their hands and read labels with new attention. They notice the graceful language, the comforting promises, the way the words are arranged to feel like reassurance. They begin to ask, gently at first, what exactly is inside? Clerks answer with practiced smiles. Doctors answer with impatience. Manufacturers answer with confidence. But questions, once they become common, cannot be neatly returned to silence. In New York, a public gathering forms in a square where marble buildings catch the pale light of autumn. The crowd is not wild. It is orderly. People stand close, shoulders brushing, breath visible in the cool air. A speaker raises his voice, not to rage, but to persuade. He speaks of moral health, of families, of mothers, of the responsibility to protect what is precious. His tone is stern, yet oddly soothing, because it suggests that the confusion of the last decades can be given a shape. On makeshift tables, volunteers place bottles like specimens. They pour liquids into glass tubes. They scrape powders onto paper. They compare doses, and they read names aloud. Laudanum, morphine, cocaine, alcohol. The words sound sharp against the soft murmur of the crowd. The woman covers her mouth as she realizes that the pleasant syrup she has kept for years contains something stronger than she ever imagined. A man frowns, not only in anger, but in confusion, because he has trusted doctors and advertisements and the clean fonts of printed labels, as if neat letters could never lie. For Catherine, the shift is more private. She is not standing in a crowd. She is in her parlour, and the only audience is the quiet clock on the mantel. She has received a pamphlet from a women's health circle. It is simple, almost plain. It lists common ingredients and their effects. It explains, with an almost gentle firmness, that a person may feel better at first, and then worse without the remedy, and that this worsening is not proof of weakness. It can be proof of the body learning, adapting, and then demanding the familiar in order to feel normal. She reads the pamphlet twice. The paper is thin. The ink has bled slightly, yet the words feel solid, as if they could be carved into wood. That evening she does something small and brave. She measures her usual dose, then she sets the spoon down, and she pours a little back into the bottle. The reduction is tiny, almost symbolic, but symbolism matters, because it is how a mind begins to change direction. She replaces the cork and sets the bottle back on the shelf with slow care. Her fingertips linger on the glass, cool and smooth. She notices how the bottle seems to reflect lamplight the way a mirror does, returning brightness without offering warmth. The next day, the hours stretch. She feels the familiar tremor at the edges of afternoon, that thin shiver that is more in the nerves than in the muscles. She breathes slowly, as she has been taught to breathe when she wants to appear composed. She sits near a window and watches dust drift in a shaft of pale light. She listens to the distant sound of street life, a carriage wheel, a vendor's call, the faint laughter of children. She tells herself that these sounds are real, and that her discomfort is also real, and that both can exist without requiring immediate correction. In those days, the city offers comfort in small physical things, because people have learnt to cling to what can be touched. A shawl warmed on a chair, a bowl of oranges on a side table, their skins releasing a faint brightness when the room is heated, the gentle scratch of a pen across paper, the soft click of a needle as it passes through cloth. Catherine learns to return to such details when her body becomes restless, when her palms feel strange. She rubs them together and notices the warmth building, a simple warmth that does not come from any bottle. When her mind begins to race, she focuses on the slow rise and fall of a curtain as a draft moves through it. The draft smells of coal smoke, winter air, and a trace of soap from the hallway. And in that scent she finds a small anchor. When the urge rises, she does not fight it like an enemy. She watches it like weather. She remembers that a storm can move across a sky without destroying the sky. She thinks of Francis Willard reading letters late at night, the lamp low, the window black with winter. She thinks of unknown women in unknown towns, each one enduring the long unease of change. The thought does not remove Catherine's symptoms, but it gives them a frame, and in that frame she can hold them a little more gently. In other homes, other women do similar quiet experiments. They move their medicines from the most visible shelf to a drawer. They delay a dose by 10 minutes, then 20. They write down what they feel, not as hysteria, but as observation. They learn that the body can be uncomfortable without being broken, and that discomfort can crest and fall. Some gather in small rooms for what they call education circles. The meetings are modest. A kettle murmurs on the stove. Chairs scrape softly on floorboards. A baby fusses and is rocked until the sound becomes a slow rhythm. A woman reads aloud from a pamphlet, her voice steady, her words chosen to soothe rather than frighten. When someone confesses, in a voice almost too quiet to hear, that she cannot miss her drops without shaking, no one laughs, no one scolds. A hand is placed gently over her gloved fingers. The room breathes as one, and the woman learns that she is not alone. Outside Catherine's home, the political world is moving, and it moves with the slow heaviness of institutions. Men in suits debate in rooms that smell of paper, tobacco, and polished wood. Lobbyists speak in calm voices in hallways. Newspapers argue with each other. Letters arrive by the thousands, written in careful hands, describing the same pattern again and again. The public wants something simple, the truth, written plainly on the bottle. The reformers do not always agree on tone. Some speak of morality. Some speak of science. Some speak of the rights of consumers. Yet all of these currents begin to flow in the same direction. The country has grown large, and the marketplace has grown faster than the old habits of trust. When goods can be shipped by rail across hundreds of miles, when a bottle can appear in a town that has never met its maker, a label becomes a kind of handshake. People begin to insist that the handshake must be honest. By June of 1906, the argument has narrowed to a point that can be voted on. The Pure Food and Drug Act is not, in its first form, a perfect shield. It is a beginning, a new idea placed into law that a company must not hide certain ingredients behind poetic language, that a buyer has the right to know what is being swallowed, rubbed into skin, dropped into eyes, stirred into tea. When the law passes, the world does not immediately become safe. Companies adapt, they reformulate, they rename, they search for loopholes the way water searches for cracks. But the quiet miracle is that the public has learned to read. The public has learned to doubt, not with bitterness, but with a calm insistence on clarity. In the months that follow, shopkeepers rearrange their shelves. Some remedies remain, but their labels change. A clerk who once recited advertisements now points to printed ingredient lists. A mother who once bought a syrup without hesitation now pauses and asks an extra question. A physician who once dismissed concern now pauses, at least sometimes, because he senses that unquestioned confidence is no longer enough. Even those who dislike reform begin to behave differently, because the air has changed, and the old ease of secrecy no longer feels natural for those already dependent. Change remains slow. Some women reduce their tonics, then return to them, then reduce again. Some switch from one remedy to another, chasing relief like a lantern in fog. Some, like Catherine, discover that the path is not a straight line, but a gentle wandering, a learning of the body and a learning of the mind. Catherine's days do not become suddenly easy. She still has mornings of bright tension, afternoons of heavy sadness, evenings when sleep comes late. There are hours when her skin feels too sensitive to fabric, when the sound of a spoon against china seems too sharp, when her own thoughts feel too loud in her head. Yet she begins to recognize her own weather, separate from the bottle's illusion. She begins to remember that grief, too, is a kind of love, and that love does not need to be erased to be endured. In this recognition there is a quiet dignity, the kind that cannot be purchased. On one winter evening, after a day of small successes and small failures, she stands at her window and watches snow begin to fall. It is not a dramatic snow, only a patient one, flakes drifting down in the lamplight like pale moths. The street grows softer, the edges of buildings blur, the hoofbeats of a passing carriage become muffled, as if heard through cloth. She realizes, with a mild surprise, that her mind feels a fraction clearer than it did a year ago. Not bright, not triumphant, simply clear enough to notice the present moment without immediately trying to reshape it. She takes that noticing as a kind of progress. In the years that follow, the bottles in American cupboards change. Some vanish, some remain, weaker, dumber, still persuasive. The culture shifts, but human desire remains. People will always want something that promises to smooth discomfort, to brighten dull days, to quiet anxious nights. The difference, slowly, is that more people understand that comfort can be purchased in many ways, and that the cheapest comfort may sometimes cost the most. And so, as we step back from the gaslit streets of the 19th century and look toward our own shelves and our own labels, the story does not need to become a scolding. It can become a soft reminder that comfort is precious, and that anything that offers comfort can also ask a price, that the body is honest, even when language is not, that it is wise, sometimes, to slow down and read what we are offered, not with fear, but with calm attention. Imagine, for a moment, the sound of a page turning, slow and gentle. Imagine the faint crackle of a fire in a grate. Imagine the steady rhythm of your own breathing, and how that rhythm is a kind of medicine that belongs to you alone. The past has given us many warnings, but it has also given us many chances to become kinder to ourselves and more patient with the long work of being human. And now, as the story settles, as the streets dim and the voices grow quieter. May your thoughts soften the way snow softens a city. Layer by layer, may the small details of this world, the lamplight, the paper, the careful hands, drift away like distant footsteps in a hallway. Good night.